The European Union is imposing new sanctions on individuals and businesses linked to President Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. The bloc is also banning Belarusian planes from EU airspace and urging all carriers to stop flying over the country. It follows Sunday's forced landing of a passenger plane traveling from Greece to Lithuania. On board was the dissident Belarusian journalist Roman Protasevich, who was arrested when the plane touched down in Minsk. Simon McGregor-Wood has the latest.
The video of Roman Protosevich was released after rumours he'd fallen ill. He says his health is good, that he's being well treated, and confesses to organising demonstrations in Belarus. His friends say it's a forced confession. In Brussels, EU leaders turned their statements of protest into a formal response with surprising speed. They demanded the immediate release of Protosevich and his partner, also detained on Sunday, and said there will be more sanctions.
This outrageous behaviour needs a strong answer. Therefore, the European Council decided that there will be additional sanctions on individuals that are involved in the hijacking, but this time also on businesses and economic entities that are financing this regime.
The EU has also followed others in banning flights over Belarus.
And Belarus used its control over its airspace in order to perpetrate a state hijacking. Therefore, the safety and security of flights through Belarus airspace can no longer be trusted, and the Council will adopt measures to ban overflights of the EU airspace and deny access to airports, to EU airports, to Belarus airplanes.
In the US, President Joe Biden said the incident was outrageous and accused Belarusian authorities of, quote, shameful assaults on both political dissent and the freedom of the press.
This was a shocking act, diverting a flight between two EU member states for the apparent purpose of arresting a journalist. It constitutes a brazen affront to international peace and security by the regime.
It's far from clear if new sanctions will change President Lukashenko's behavior. With each new round, he becomes more dependent on his neighbor, Russian President Vladimir Putin. But the interception of a civilian flight sets a dangerous precedent and has shocked the international community. Some fear that unless there is a tough response, it may be copied by other authoritarian regimes. Simon McGregor-Wood, TRT World.
Let's get more on this from Jack Parrock, who joins us from Brussels. Now, since land borders were closed late last year, activists in the country had been objecting, saying that, in effect, dissidents are being trapped into the country. So now with these latest aviation restrictions, are the people being punished more than the government?
I don't think the European Union sees it that way. In the case even of Roman Protasevich, he was flying from Athens to Vilnius. Very few of the opposition voices and figures are flying in and out of Minsk right now. I've met a couple of different opposition figures that are forced into exile. I met one man, Paweł Latuszka, who's in Warsaw in Poland at the moment, and they certainly didn't fly out. Most of them drove out once they realised that the crackdowns of the Belarusian government were taking place after that disputed election that prompted those big protests on the streets of Minsk and other capitals. From an EU perspective, though, what they'll say is their priority must be to European Union citizens. And when you're seeing planes flying from two EU capitals be brought in forcibly by military aircraft over Belarusian airspace, they will simply say that what they're doing is making sure that they're protecting EU citizens.
All right, well, this is only one of the steps the EU is taking. They're also talking about slapping more economic sanctions on Belarus. What might those be?
Well, we don't know exactly what they'll look like, but what the European Commission and the Foreign Policy Arm is being tasked with is to look at where they can economically hit the Lukashenko regime hardest. Companies that work with the European Union, companies that operate across the borders. I actually spoke to some leaders earlier and some senior officials here in Brussels about what happened in the summit, and specifically countries like Latvia, Lithuania and Poland might even take an economic hit due to any sanctions that might be put on if they are putting on these sweeping economic sanctions and not just targeting the individuals responsible, and that's what we know is going to happen. The European Union, the leaders agreed and put through all of the measures that were on the table for them during this summit. They approved every single measure as far as they could go, including the airspace closures, including the economic sanctions. And we don't know exactly what they'll look like, but the sort of machines here in Brussels will start working out what they are exactly to try and put as much pressure on the Lukashenko government.
And of course, this won't be the first round of restrictions. 59 Belarusian officials were put under sanctions late last year, but that doesn't seem to have brought any sort of change in Lukashenko's government's behavior. Are these restrictions even working?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, when they target the individuals with sanctions, what they do is they put on travel bans and asset freezes. So those people, the 59, including President Lukashenko himself after those protests last year, got put on one of these sanctions lists. They're unable to travel into the European Union or to access any of their assets, their homes, their bank accounts in the EU. Now, obviously, pro-government figures that are working in Belarus, having seen any of those sanctions that were put on before, probably either if they did have any assets in the European Union, removed them by now, and they're not really expecting to travel into the EU. Those sanctions are seen more as symbolic, but as I say, what they're trying to do is really try and push economic sanctions through here in Brussels after this leaders' summit that could have an effect. Also, though, the reality is if they really, really want to have any serious effect, the arm that they can twist or try to twist the most would be the Kremlin in Russia, that really is the major backer of the Lukashenko government. And without backing from the Kremlin, you can think that Alexander Lukashenko probably wouldn't hold power much longer in Minsk. And I think that's something that the EU leaders are acutely aware of. Relations with Russia were also an issue on the summit agenda. They came out with some strong statements, but as yet, nothing too clear on how they would try and interplay those two issues at the moment.
Right, so all options on the table to build pressure on Alexander Lukashenko's government. Jack Parrock there. Thank you so much.